Oh, yeah. AtScale and Power BI went into a head-to-head cage match battle where we pitted the two tools against each other to see how they came out at the end of the competition. We're going to get into the study. I'm going to give you some links to it, and we're going to go deep into it. This is exciting. Where do you see it? Okay, so for a complete and total disclaimer here, this is a test that was done by AtScale comparing Power BI performance. We're going to get into what they did, how they did it. So all these links are down below. They've documented pretty thoroughly. I mean, I think there's like 50 pages in how they execute all this stuff. But I'm going to give you a summary of it so that you can choose to read it or not. All right. Now, what the heck were they testing, right? So Microsoft Fabric came out with this new thing called DirectLake, right? Because classically, we had two options when it came to working with our semantic models in with Power BI. That was either direct query, where you'd have to like query that backend lakehouse data warehouse, and you're very heavily dependent upon how quickly that data could come back. It was often really slow. It was nice because you wouldn't have to like replicate the data between the two places, but it was a challenge to maintain that performance. The next lever was import, where you'd import the data into your tabular models or into your semantic layer, and then it'd be really fast to be in memory, but it'd be a cached copy. So you'd have to do refreshes. Maybe you do like partitioning and you do refreshes every 5 minutes, but either way, you'd have to refresh that data. And so that meant a copy of the data in two different places. With DirectLake, Power BI is optimized to go directly against the Delta files that are stored inside of Microsoft Fabric. All right. That means you get in memory performance running against that gold layer data that's in your data lake at that same performance and at that speed, which means you're not having to duplicate data at all. That means you could stream data in and have those live analytics in place inside your semantic models. But is it performant? How well does that work out? That's what this study seeks to get to the bottom of. All right. So let's explain what Dave did, or AtScale did. Right. So they took a standard data set. This is a TPC-DS data set, and they tested out at the 100 gig, 1 terabyte, and 10 terabyte levels. Okay. So this data is a star schema, so there's no kind of real concerns about that. And then they took 20 TPC-DS queries, which kind of represent standard business patterns of evaluating the data inside of a backend, right? Like you're doing research into customers or you're doing product research, that type of a thing. All of that's available inside of the study of the exact queries that were run, so you can see that. All right. Now, the environment to get this set up, they set up an F64 environment, and that's a trial capacity, right? They configured everything with DirectLake, so like they brought all the CSV files in, they landed it in, they imported it into the lake, they made sure vSort order was on, they made sure all of the proper performance items were set for all three of the data sets, and then they took consistent measures that were relatively well optimized and written in order to make these things work and operate. And those same models were used in both places. All right. Now, the cost comparison they did, so they were trying to show that, like, hey, yeah, we're using the same stuff. They're showing like, okay, hey, here's your cost of the Power BI and or Fabric, and the cost of AtScale on Snowflake. I will say this is the first time we start to get into something where we'll talk on later. So I'm just going to highlight something that I think is a little off, but we'll come back to that in a bit. All right. Now, the scale is you don't want to test with just one user. Okay, let's see how it performs. But let's also test if you got 5 users going in doing something at the same time, 25 users, or 50 users going in and doing these same tests, right? So, Dave and the guys at AtScale wrote some really great test cases, and they're using Apache JMeter to execute these things in a very consistent manner so that you could get that true comparison of tests. And it wasn't like, okay, I run one query, wait 5 minutes, run the other, and measure it. It was all run in a very methodical fashion. Results came in. You kind of showing the results right here. The top is the total run time, and the bottom is the number of failures. And this is kind of where we start to get into seeing where we have some issues here. And we'll talk about that a bit. Is at the lower levels, right, with fewer concurrency on there, we generally have relatively good performance, no issues of it, no real issues, absolutely none at the lowest level. But as we start to scale, we get more and more longer running things as well as errors inside of the fabric space. Okay, so if we look at the comparative results, we can see Snowflake on AtScale is on the left. The Power BI environment, Power BI/Fabric, is on the right. So you can actually see some. If you zoom in here, can I do that here? We can see at that lower layer, we have almost a 9.8x improvement in performance of Power BI over Snowflake on AtScale. But we have much slower and error-prone issues on this side, all right? Again, these are some other issues that we're going to get to in a little bit. But what was the summary of the study, okay? So, at the 100 terabyte mark, Power BI Fabric was 10 times faster. That's awesome. When we go to that 1 terabyte mark, though, then AtScale becomes 9 times faster, no errors. And at the 10 terabyte mark, it's 13 times faster. Oops, you can't quite make out the 13. It's 13x faster, all right? The challenge being that the Power BI was falling away from DirectLake. It was going back to direct query. And the act of it going back to direct query generated a lot of errors, okay? Remember, we had that upper path. That's a problem for what we're talking about here, because that meant it was actually hitting the SQL DW layer or the SQL query layer of the lakehouse versus going directly to the Delta files. You would not think that this was a big deal, but it's actually something that can cause some real problems, all right? Now, let's see. Their conclusion was, Power BI Fabric is great on small data sets, less than 100 gigs. On anything larger, though, they're saying, AtScale and Snowflake is more performant. All right? So that was the conclusion that they got to. Now, was that a fair evaluation? Let's really think about this, okay? So if we think about it, this was something that was funded by AtScale, right? So it was run by Dave Mariani and Albert Zhu. The bias of the testing team is going to definitely be there. So, we're going to have to fail that portion of it because, inherently, that's just part of it, right? So it wasn't a third party doing this. Now, I'll be a little biased here. I'm going to say, okay, they passed because because I had a peer review. They came in, they had me look at the stuff. We went back and forth a couple of times to, what was working, what wasn't, provide some feedback on how they can improve their tests. So I'll really give them a pass on that side because, what else would you really look for, right? I think when we talk about testing conditions, did they set this up in an honest manner? Yeah, I think they did a good job here. It wasn't really biased one way or the other. It was really set up proper. The methodology seemed right. We'll give them a pass on that. I'm actually going to search myself here. Let's see here. There we go. Sorry about that. Now, when I say effort, I'm going to actually give them a pass. I know, like I said, Dave and I went back and forth for, I think a couple weeks on this and, before we actually did the live thing. So he did put a ton of time and energy into it. So, I'm going to give him a pass on all of these. All right. So I think they really did their best to like have an honest evaluation of the environment. So I am passing them on this. This didn't appear like it was a biased solution. All right. Whoop. But I want to get into, is the conclusion right? Like, did they come up with the right conclusion? They went through all of this stuff. Is their conclusion and the summary that they're giving right? Well, there's some of it that they definitely got right, right? Like, yes, data was equal, right? That was 100% spot on. The Fabric Lakehouse was configured appropriately. That they set these things up. They didn't artificially not set up the lakehouse right. They made sure to apply the vsort order. They made sure that it was in, and that they evaluated cold cache versus hot cache, and they did those things, and that was very good. They did the same tests so that it was very consistent in what they were testing out between the environments, and they did the same loads. Now I have some things that I question, and I'm gonna first. I'm going to question the cardinality of the TPC-DS AtScale. It applies a linear graph to how it adds in cardinality at the larger data sets. And while there may be some companies that follow this pattern, I question and challenge that. Maybe that is okay, but I question that. I'm also going to question anything that was done on the Snowflake side. Frankly, I didn't see any of the configurations on the Snowflake side. We really just spent time focused on making sure that the Fabric side was set up and right. So there could be other things that were done on the Snowflake side that I'm not aware of. But for the most part, the biggest question I had here I still have is like, I am not sure about it's the base TPC-DS data set, and this has nothing to do with what AtScale did, right? This is the data set that they evaluated, right? Now, I think they did get some things wrong, okay? So first thing, if you remember the costs, the costs that they went into, they were really looking at the spot prices and not the scale prices or reserve instant prices. And I think that there's some comparison levels there that were wrong. And if you looked at, especially if you're talking about a very large capacity, Microsoft's bursting and smoothing makes it very easy to leverage those larger SKUs and manage your costs much easier throughout the day without having to stop, and all that good stuff. So I'm going to contend that they got some of the cost stuff a little bit not right. Okay, so it's not perfect. It's not completely and totally wrong, but I challenge just a little bit of that. And then the other thing that I think that they got wrong was the environment, right? The environment, had some very specific settings inside the semantic model that could have been configured and should have been configured in order to ensure that they weren't going to direct query and that they kept the model inside a DirectLake. Now, to that end, I think Microsoft and we'll get into that a little bit. That's one of the things that was not right about the tests. If we resolve that, I kind of know how those tests of performance work. So we'll get into that in a second. Now, what was missed, right? All right, so Fabric and Microsoft, that setting that needed to be done really would have eliminated a lot of the failures and the scale issues that we saw. Now, I'm not sure, they kind of called out in the video. I didn't really see it mentioned inside of the white paper, but AtScale inherently provides a singular semantic layer with shared assets, governance, security, and management. Now, one side of that is like, oh, they missed something for the Power BI side. The other side is they didn't bring up a big strength that AtScale has, right? So, honestly, I think that plays into the opportunities, right? Fabric should, and Microsoft Power BI should be eliminating those additional configurations, right? Like, those things shouldn't need to be done, right? Like, let's just have that work and function. And I kind of think they're going to do that. I don't know for a fact, but pretty sure Christian Wade would back me up. They're going to make it so you don't have to do that configuration. So I think that would eliminate that issue. I also know that through the testing, they had some issues when they were trying to go from an F64 up to an F256. Like, its scale just didn't happen, and so like tests were delayed, and it put an undue burden on the testing in order to do the evaluation, which prevented other work from being done. So Microsoft has some opportunities on like the scalability of the solutions to make that easier. That just isn't there today, but I have a feeling as Fabric continues to mature, that's something that we're going to see get addressed. And Fabric doesn't have something that is like a platform level semantic model. That's kind of a big deal, right? Like, you can't have shareable measures or shareable calculated columns. No matter how much I hate calculated columns, they're a thing that's out there. And if one person calculates it, there's no good way to make it readily available without reloading or deploying code inside the Fabric space without taking a ton of engineering and efforts on that side. All right? Now, that's something I'd really like to see Microsoft Fabric take on. Now, opportunities on the AtScale side is, I think, honestly, if you looked at that performance on those smaller data sets, AtScale wasn't performant. It was not as performant on any data set under 100 gigs. And maybe they're saying that their market doesn't have any 100 gig models, and I'm reluctant to believe the stats that I've heard that over 99% of data sets that people consume are under 100 gigs. I'm not sure that that's right. Maybe it is, but getting Dave, get performant on those smaller data sets. That's probably a good space that you could place some in. And then the other thing is they're going to really have to watch the Fabric performance, because I've seen that working and functioning at scale, and it is as performant on that 10 terabyte as it is on the 100 gig models. So I think if we go to my conclusions on this, I think you're going to find that Fabric is 10x more performant broadly across the platform, as long as you have the right scale and the right options in place, right? You have to have the right size capacity, but it's going to be exceedingly performant and faster than anything else out there. That's not in study, but that is my conclusion from going through and looking at it. But Fabric falls way short when it comes to having that singular semantic layer level inside the platform. There's just nothing there. You can deploy tens of thousands of data sets or semantic models in your environment, and large companies have that. That's a big problem, all right? AtScale, on the other hand, they've been doing semantic layers for 10 years. They are hands down, as far as I know, they own that space, and they really crush and they dominate there. Okay, so that enterprise grade, like singular semantic layer, AtScale's doing a great job in that area, and their performance is really good out of the box. There's no, hey, do you have the proper settings in order to get that together? At least, again, as far as I can tell, maybe that is more tricky than I'm aware of, but these are the big things that I'm going to take away. I would take away from this. So, all right. I hope you found this interesting. I'm going to leave all the links down below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you have to say. Some of my, my evaluation is biased too. Like, I'm not going to back away from that. But let me know what you think about comparing Power BI and AtScale and where they fit in the market space and how they compete against each other. I mean, honestly, I think it's more of a like an improv situation where it's like an and thing. Like, you would use Fabric and with Power BI, and you would use AtScale, right? Like, there's an and component here that makes a ton of sense to me. And it's just offering up different aspects of the solution and where you'd want to fit. All right. If you found this useful, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, turn the alarm bell for all the future notifications. You guys have a great day. Peace. Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.